Has this been the craziest summer in American politics ever? First, Donald Trump trounces Joe Biden in a debate. Then Democrats pressure Joe Biden to drop out of the race, and he refuses. Next up, Trump is very nearly assassinated by a deranged gunman. Then, Biden actually does drop out, and Kamala Harris is coronated as the new Democratic candidate. And here we are. We've added some VPs to the mix, J.D. Vance and Tim Walz. But now, Blaire White, a YouTuber and host of the Blaire White Project podcast, joins me now for a conversation about what is even going on in these exciting times. Welcome to Rising, Blaire.
Thanks for having me.
Great to be with you. So let's talk about how the media is covering the events of the last several weeks. I think it's so interesting that we got, for a brief time, a truly skeptical and scrutinizing and hostile media with respect to Joe Biden when they turned on him and decided, oh my God, we've been lied to, or we know we've been complicit in a lie that now the American people see for themselves that this man has declined, is cognitively incapable of being president in the future, maybe not even right now, and has to go. And they were relentlessly hostile. And now he's gone, and it's Kamala Harris, and what we've seen, this fawning coverage of her, and then so far the coverage of Walz has also been like weirdly positive, all this kind of dad stuff. What's your take?
Yeah, the Biden stuff to me is interesting because it was really obvious in 2020, in the election leading up last time. I felt like it was just an open sort of thing on the right that was talked about. Obviously, the reason why he was nicknamed Sleepy Joe, of course, by Trump was because he had these cognitive, impairments back then. And, it was due to age. And, there's theories that it's Alzheimer's, and that may be true, but it's been a lie for a long time now. So the fact that it finally took actually a live debate for the other side to see it. I think that oftentimes these lies, and we're talking about the president's fitness being the lie, is just so compartmentalized that perhaps there genuinely was a huge, segment of powerful people on the left who were blindsided by the debate as well. But more people than, you think probably knew, of course. And it was a cover up. And Kamala was a big part of it. The fact that she skyrocketed to Obama #2 is actually quite disturbing. It feels very dark in a way that her entire sort of essence in politics right now is media constructed. I tweeted earlier, or posted on X, I'm trying to not use the word tweet anymore, that she is a media construction, and it's true. She went from the least popular VP in memory, for me at least, and now she's on top. And I've even seen really prominent lefties like Mark Cuban actually acknowledge and tweeted recently that she went from worst to first. And it's like they're just missing that final link to be like, okay, so why are people suddenly liking her? It's because of brainwashing. And we have an entirety of the corporate press that's stacked against Donald Trump. And I think that's obvious and apparent. And for me, that's, there's a million reasons why I'm supporting Donald Trump in this election, but that's one of the biggest ones, just on principle, that I don't want to live in a world where we have, the media completely constructing a reality and setting the window of accepted thought. So for me, a vote for Trump is a vote just against the media, among other things. But
if that debate had not happened, I fully expect that Joe Biden would still be running. His team would still be acting like there is nothing wrong with him, that you are being misled if you are watching videos of him appearing to seem disoriented or needing help getting around. They would still be saying those videos have been altered or clipped in an unfair way. They would be pretending everything is fine. Karine Jean-Pierre would be pretending everything is fine. Kamala Harris would be pretending everything is fine. He would be nominated at the convention. Then people would be like, oh my God, I can't believe this is our candidate, when he tried to give a speech. They would have done a debate afterward, but it would have been too late to swap him out. I bet Donald Trump partly regrets having done that debate prior to Biden actually being the nominee. Maybe he didn't imagine, and I don't blame him for that, because I did not think they would actually switch out Biden. I didn't think he would go. I didn't think they could make him. But finally, they put enough pressure to have him do it. I bet there's regret that they did the debate before before it was official.
I would imagine. And like you said, it's not as if anyone could predict that. But of course, hindsight, that does seem like, a thing that probably was less in the favor of Trump's chances of winning. But at the end of the day, it's I think it's important for people to note that the strategy, both for when they ran Biden and now for Kamala, is to hide their candidate as much as humanly possible. A lot of people are rightfully upset about the fact that Kamala has participated in zero media interviews since she became the de facto, nomination here. And if the assassination on, President Donald Trump had been successful, I think it's worth noting that we'd be living in a reality where both candidates from either side receive no votes to be there. And that's not the America I want to live in. I don't think that's the way the system is intended to be. And it's a pretty dark thought, this the idea of like there are countries that install candidates, right? And for me, it can sound conspiratorial, it can sound extreme, it can sound like I'm paranoid, but it feels as if in the air there's this energy of they're trying to test and see if they're able to just start installing candidates because it's not as if there's no genuine momentum for Kamala. I think it could probably be described as a relief from Democrats that, like, okay, we have someone, right? Because they were left feeling like they had no one when they saw Biden's ability and the party was completely demoralized. So I think the bubble of excitement she's having right now is just their idea of like, okay, we have a person that can do this possibly rather than none. But no one can even really cite what she stands for. I mean, all the way down to the fact that she doesn't have any policies listed on her website, which to me seems disqualifying. What are you bargaining for with America right now? What is the offer to Americans to vote for you? Uh, and then I think the popularity she has is completely uh, removed from reality in the sense of they're not actually excited about policy or what she's going to do in office. Yesterday at a rally, she was saying she's going to lower prices and work on inflation. And she's been in office for 4 years and she's currently in office. Some may even say she's acting sort of as the de facto president right now because they don't have faith in Biden's ability to make any decisions. It's a really, really unshaky time. And I think back to the past two elections, I think Americans are kind of in this cycle of just expecting some sort of national trauma to occur every election, whether it's lockdowns last time, mail-in votes. A lot of people on the right don't like how that election went down. 2016, this year feels even scarier than the last two. And I hope that whatever comes with the election, we start to sort of recalibrate and just expect better from our candidates and our parties that are supposed to support democracy when in fact they're installing candidates right now.
And expect better from our media. We will be back with
Yes.
more Rising in just a minute, and we'll have the rest of this interview available over the weekend. You can tune in then. I'm continuing my conversation with Blaire White, a YouTuber, host of the Blaire White Project podcast, about what is going on in this election, who Kamala Harris is, what she stands for. Welcome back, Blaire.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so we were just starting to get into some of the nitty gritty, the meat of Kamala Harris's candidacy. I think I've come to view her. Look, she's someone who had a very progressive record as a California liberal type person, was, I think, pushed to take a bunch of progressive stances. And then in 2020, with respect to criminal justice type stuff, she was actually in some ways running away from her record that was in some ways tough on crime, although I would argue it was tough on not the crimes you necessarily want to be tough on, like whether your kid shows up for school or not. But whatever the case was, she then ran from that record and tried to, portray herself as a totally different person. Now, she's not saying a lot about the issues. Obviously, she has to own what she was part of, this administration that is incredibly unpopular, that's economic policies are very unpopular, that's immigration policies are very unpopular, that's foreign policy is unpopular in a lot of different ways with a lot of different ideological slices of the American electorate. And is what she stands for just, I'm not Trump, and a lot of you out there still really dislike Trump, and I'm the person on the ballot who's not that guy?
Unfortunately, yes. And you saw it yesterday at her rally when, you know, people were posting this moment where she silenced pro-Palestine protesters. And, a lot of people are hailing it as this iconic girl boss moment. But in reality, if you pay attention to what she said, she basically essentially said to them, shut up or you're getting Donald Trump. And that's been the messaging from the Democrat Party for every day of every month of every year since Trump entered the political zeitgeist. And, that I think is just beneath what the American people should expect. I would expect that they'd be running on what they can do to help people rather than just not being Donald Trump. Because I think what you've seen recently in the last year, and I've been thinking about this a lot, Trump is definitely the least radioactive in terms of social stigma of being a supporter or even indifferent to him here this year than any year in recent memory. I think it's the best time to say you're a Trump supporter, which I think speaks volumes to how he's just not as hated as he used to be. I think they really reached a cap of how much hate they could stir up against him. And so I think people are less inspired to go vote for them when that's still all they have. They're still making no offer to the American people about what they do to improve the quality of the American people's lives. And Trump has a lot of promises in that vein, right? A lot of people feel as though, correctly, that they were just in a better economic spot when he was president. And that's just a fact, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's Trump's successes lately have been very interesting because this is someone who was opposed by a significant number of people within the Republican Party back when he ran in 2016. People like Ted Cruz were at the convention, spoke, did not endorse him. He had the previous presidential Republican candidates, Romney and McCain, denounce him after Access Hollywood. He had, even then when he won, he had substantial number of Republicans skeptical of him and vowing to work against him. Then when he lost in 2020, what took place after that caused further defections, caused some of his own Republican senators voted to impeach him, something that has never happened, people voting for a member of their own party to be impeached. Today, I would argue he has more support in the Republican Party than ever before, that there is really not any meaningful dissent anymore. At the convention, you had would-be rivals Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis falling in line, bending the knee, strongly endorsing him. We've just lost the capacity to be shocked or scandalized by the things he says and does. And now I still do know, I know people in my own family, I know voters in the swing states who are Republicans or have usually voted for Republicans and don't like Trump. And if it was anybody but Trump, this would be a very easy choice for them. They would vote for whoever the Republican is. Because it's Trump, they're struggling and they haven't made up their minds. Now they don't like what they're hearing from Kamala Harris. I think they probably don't like that she picked an extremely progressive vice presidential candidate. But J.D. Vance is also a very right-wing candidate, very much in line with Trump, and I don't think is putting people who, obviously he's beloved by people who also like Trump, but I don't think he's reassuring people who were, very much on the fence to go that direction. So it's an interesting situation people find themselves in if they're not sold on Trump. They don't hate him. They miss his policies, but there is something that people I just can't have that guy again.
Right. There's absolutely people who, under any circumstance from either party, are just never Trump people, and that's just how that goes. But I do think that the vibe has shifted so much. I think that it can't be understated how much the attempted assassination on President Donald Trump really impacted people and changed their perspective of him. I think that, we have a corporate press trying to memory hold that event, and we have platforms like Facebook and Google that are actually literally censoring the event itself. And I think that for me as a Trump supporter, I don't want to really let that go. I don't want to, pretend as if that happened 2 years ago rather than just like 2, 3 weeks ago. And I think that that was just the cherry on top of really the past year on a cultural level, especially among younger people. I mean, it is just not a sin to say you like Donald Trump anymore. And being desensitized to, the scandalous narrative that they try to glue onto him, like you said, people just aren't shocked by him anymore. Because if you look at what's happening on the other side, it's actually a lot more shocking. I mean, Kamala Harris just stole a nomination. I mean, they just put up a candidate that received 0 votes. That's not democracy. I mean, that is so much more, I think, offensive to Americans and the idea, the concept of America than anything you can try to pin on Donald Trump. I mean, the attacks have actually just gotten weaker and weaker in terms of the media lies about him. Like, the whole bloodbath narrative that we saw this year. I mean, that was, I think in past years would have been a lot more effective, and yet so many people saw through it. Not everyone, right? I'm not living in a bubble here. There's definitely a lot of people affected by, the corporate press and the lies. But I think people understand that Trump is a deeply imperfect person. And I think they recognize that that mirrors all of us. Whereas you have a party on the other side that, it's a lot of projection. It's a lot of, you think about the main sort of slogan they've been using for the past week or so, which is this word, weird, right? And people are kind of saying, this is projection. You guys are calling actually the most normal. You can say that JD Vance is, a bit more conservative and not leaning into moderates, and I do agree with that. But I think that on a basic level, he does represent sort of the most normal guy you've ever met in your life. And I think it's just the stigma against conservative values and against being a Republican and the denormalization of it in culture that kind of makes us, first think of it as something that's strange or on the fringe, but it's really not, especially at this point in time. I mean, the stigma's just worn off.
Yeah, the "you're weird, I'm normal" kind of rhetoric
Yeah.
coming from Democrats being embraced by the media. I think everybody who runs for office is a little bit weird. Like, why do you want the job of bossing other people around, of deciding how to spend their finances and what rules they should live under? That's what's appealing to you. That's a little bit, maybe weird isn't even the right word for it. It's a little bit psychotic. But yeah, this whole weirdness thing has become the conversation. And of course, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz have been taking hits from the right on sort of cultural issues, social issues. Donald Trump referred to Tim Walz, there's a criticism, very into the transgender, Minnesota being decreed under by Tim Walz like a trans refugee state. You are a trans woman. You write a lot, or you speak a lot about these issues from a conservative perspective. What do you make of how that has entered the criticism coming from conservatives at kind of the progressive agenda of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz?
Well, first of all, I think that the extreme politicization of trans people is something that's been sort of a net negative for everyone. It definitely has for trans people. And I think the concept that the Democratic Party is the saviors of trans people, the defenders of trans people, when I began my transition nearly a decade ago, this was before sort of we entered that era of like extreme politics and these groups being used for, political power. And it was, in fact, the Democrats who first started making legislation about bathrooms, about women's spaces, and trying to really drum up that this is a cultural issue worth fighting, whereas before everything was fine and no one really had any issues that you now see today. So that is always to be noted, and a lot of people don't recognize that people see, right wingers as these attackers of trans people, and in many cases they are. However, it's a war that was started so unnecessarily by Democrats, and that's why I can never see them as like the saviors of trans people. As far as the attacks on Tim Walz, with the tampon stuff, which all this conversation just seems so beneath the dignity of like what we should expect to even be having as political discourse, first of all. But the tampon stuff is referring to policies he enacted where he put tampons in boys' bathrooms. And you can, if you're on the left, perhaps interpret that as someone who is being very kind to the possibility that there is one female to male trans student in the school that will benefit and cannot afford tampons. But at the end of the day, what it really is trying to shift culture in a certain direction that a lot of people are uncomfortable with and a lot of trans people are uncomfortable with. They've been taken on this ride by the Democratic Party. And, a lot of people are very asleep to that. But as someone who has seen the way that they've been used, trans people, by Democrats for years now, I do not feel safe or comfortable with Tim Walz fighting for me, especially considering, he's thrown events. I saw a clip today with drag queens dancing around kids, and it's not the vibe of actually many people in the LGBT community now. A lot of people, even trans people, are saying, maybe we should reverse course. Maybe we are being a bit excessive here with what we're pushing and actually inviting people to start to be annoyed by us. And also, trans people, gay people, and also racial minorities, right? This is not just an LGBT thing, are utilized in some really dark and twisted ways by the Democrats. Just the fact that there's so much fear mongering and they make such a strong attempt to keep these minorities in a perpetual state of fear. You know, Project 2025, just the biggest lie they just continue to tell every Democrat on the other side, Kamala Harris in particular, this Google Project 2025, Google Project 2025. It doesn't matter how many times Trump disavows it. It doesn't matter how many times people say no one's trying to take away gay marriage, especially not Donald Trump, who had a gay wedding at his house just a few months ago. Let me know when any of you like gay people enough to have a gay wedding in your house. It's a lot of fear mongering, and I think that it's abusive. I think that, you know, minorities are sort of in this abusive relationship with the Democrat Party who use them for votes and keep them in this perpetual state of fear, but really do nothing for them. And you're seeing certain groups wake up first. I think my prediction from this election is that we're going to see perhaps close to double the black vote this time for Donald Trump than last time. It's actually remarkable how um, much more normalized Trump is that I've seen in, black communities, black social media. And the same is actually true of especially gay Republicans. I mean, you have the corporate press running articles, I forget which platform, but uh, the dangerous rise of right-wing gay men, right? Like they're noticing that these groups are waking up. And it's not that Republicans are perfect, they're far from perfect. In fact, I didn't like some of the stuff, reactions from people more on the far right to certain speakers at the RNC. It felt very much like, you know, traditional conservatives trying to hold on to something that once was, which was a party for a certain type of person. But I think that Donald Trump really represents something very different than that. Donald Trump is not this hardcore traditionalist conservative by any means. And I think it makes minorities a lot more comfortable to find a place in the party.
Blaire White, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.